Hey guys. So you get two live streams in a row. Kind of surprising, huh? I don't know, I just felt like live streaming and doing some stream of conscious conversation because I think there are some conversations that need to be had that aren't necessarily always structured. So, and this is just going to probably be a collection of thoughts that I'm kind of just stringing together because I've been thinking a lot over the past couple days, and I'll explain the title of this video. The video is titled America's Problem with Mental Health because I really think that people have a very difficult time talking about mental health and even acknowledging the fact that sometimes mental health plays a role in certain behaviors. Now, I mean, keep in mind, obviously, I'm not a psychologist, but in examining my own mental health and speaking to other people, you kind of get a good idea of what people do to cope with things, what people do when they are in denial about things, what people do like in groups of people, what they do when they try to avoid addressing certain problems. And I've been seeing that a lot over the past few days. So, hi, Olivia. It's good to see you. Thank you for being here. So, Wednesday, I believe it was Wednesday, there was a shooting in Parkland, Florida, at a school. And if I remember the count correctly, 17 people died, students, teachers, and there was already a police presence in the school. And this individual ended up purchasing some sort of automatic assault weapon and used it. Um, and thus this tragedy happened, right? And of course, you will see people go through on like it's very interesting monitoring social media after tragedies like this because you will get the people who are praying, like giving thoughts and prayers to the victims and their families. You'll get the people who are adamantly defending guns. You will get the people who are adamantly speaking out against guns. And then you'll get the people who are, why are we even talking about this? Get over it and move forward. Those people kind of baffle me. And many of these groups baffle me, but I like, I I'm just going to explain my stance. I am obviously I'm okay if a person wants to have a weapon to defend themselves. I feel like every person has a right to that. But I do think that restrictions and evaluations should be made a bigger priority when it comes to determining an individual's capability to safely use or secure a weapon like this. Um, Now, mind you, I have not had too much experience with, well, I mean, my knowledge of weapons like this, like, they're not huge, but, I mean, I'm capable of doing research and I understand, like, why people get them, and people largely get them because it does help them feel safe. Um, so that is where my question comes in. My question is, when has America's sense of safety, like, when has our sense of safety, how do I word this? When did it begin where we thought that our sense of safety needed to be tied to having some sort of weapon nearby? Historically speaking, you could look at our history and kind of look at various conflicts we've been in and tie it to that. But truthfully, and this is my view, you're more than welcome to disagree with me. You can share your thoughts. Like, I'm totally okay with people disagreeing, obviously. But my stance on this is I believe that America's fixation with gun possession comes back to wanting to feel a sense of power or feel a sense of control over one's environment. And the reason why I say this is because I've done a little bit of research to determine where people kind of got that mentality. And people back then, especially when America was first colonized, there was always this continuing theme and continuing mentality that man needed to have power over nature, lest nature overpower man. And I think that is where our wanting some sort of weapon for protection came from. Obviously, we have greater command over our environment now, so the mental shift shifted to protecting ourselves from other people. So it's interesting to examine where our priority was then versus where our priority is now, I suppose. That's the point that I'm trying to make. But moving on from the historical aspect, we all know that America has a problem talking about mental health. I really think that groups of people can suffer mental health ailments as well. And I really do believe that culturally we feel a sense of paranoia while at the same time we feel that we need to have control over situations. And in all of that, somehow the the fixation with wanting power and protection is translated and correlated to masculinities. And I really do believe that masculinity has a huge, huge part of why things are justified the way they're justified. Power comes in many forms, and masculinity perpetuates that power because, well, throughout our entire history, men have been in power. And I'm not saying necessarily that men are at fault. I'm saying that culturally our mentality is at fault. Akane says guns were more accessible in the past. Most homes had a rifle over them. They were. It's because it was expected back then, because back then it was necessary to hunt and defend oneself. And obviously, I think it's totally okay for a person to defend oneself and hunt. But there needs to be, like, back then, there really weren't restrictions. And I think when something becomes more popularized, restrictions need to be made, and there have been, but I think there need to be additional ones in order to ensure safety, you know? Now, I was doing some research and noted that in multiple states, I think it was over a dozen states, people can still purchase and possess a gun without having any type of permit, which really surprised me. And in my mind, I was just like, why wouldn't that fail-safe be in place in these states? Granted, the government allowed the states to make that decision on their own. Yes, they kinda I know that. The founders wanted the right to bear arms as a right because the European aristocracy wanted the masses unarmed to control them. I completely agree, but you also have to realize when one group of people gets too much power, regardless what end of the spectrum it is on, it's dangerous regardless. Um, so I guess the thing is, the problem is unbelievably complex. Because we can't revoke the rights of certain people, but we also have to take into consideration that there are quite a few people out there, if these objects get in the wrong hands, they can be used for the wrong purpose. So I don't necessarily think there needs to be a ban, obviously, but I really think that there should be more fail-safes placed in the process itself. Fail-safes, I really think that there should be psychological evaluations for people, um, who are wanting to own and purchase a gun. And I'm not saying, like, super duper elaborate ones, but there should be psychological evaluations in order to determine a person's fitness for using a weapon. Some countries do that, but it's not a requirement here. I also think that there should be some sort of inspection or evaluation of a person's home when a gun is purchased to ensure the safe and secure storage of said weapons to make sure that, certain individuals do not have access to them, that they're in a safe location. Because believe me, they're not always in safe locations. Um, but and see, it's interesting. The argument, because you bring up something interesting. You said that people kill people, and I agree with that completely. But that isn't it is the overall problem of this internalized toxic need to feel in control. And you said that the Wild West heritage in America also contributes. I think that is the case too. Kind of like that protective instinct. And I think once we overcome that insecurity, maybe collectively will care more about situations like this. And I think a lot of people do care, but when I see immediately if something tragic happens like this, if a person's first thought is, "Well, don't take my guns," that really concerns me because objects are not lives. They simply aren't. And this really hit close to home for me because we're talking about an educational facility, and a lot of these happen in those locations, and it scares the hell out of me. Um, Especially people have been making the comment of, well, we should arm educators. We should ensure that educators know how to, ward off threats like this. And I'm like, I would obviously protect my students regardless, but to have an environment that's weaponized to that extent, what would that do for the learning environment as a whole? What would that do for our education system? Would we be able to educate? I don't know. Yeah. But one thing that really upset me, I was looking through Facebook earlier today, and there was a person who said, "Oh my God, this is all I see on Facebook and on the news. I wish people would just move on. What about the veterans? I wished people cared about the veterans this much." And oh my God, that really mind boggled me because the veterans are cared about, and I know there are atrocities happening against veterans, especially within our healthcare system, but to take a very tragic event like this and to turn it around and deflect it by focusing on something else, that is the classic problem that I see happening here. So America's mental health situation doesn't necessarily center in the need for power and protection, but it's also centered in deflection or evading the actual problem that's existing. People feel the need to, when they are confronted with something they don't like to hear, they immediately focus on something else. They deflect it. And whenever there is a discussion about guns, this immediately happens. Like people will always be like, well, what about this? Or what about this atrocity? Or why aren't you guys thinking about this? Um and and I get upset when people are all like, well, the media is focusing too much on this situation. The media exists to create transparency. Now, I'm not saying that the media always succeeds at creating transparency, but also the media exists to place pressure on controlling, like, governmental powers to do something about problems like this. And thus far, organizations like the NRA, they hold a lot of power, and they pay money to a lot of these politicians to support their platform. And I mean, I know that's how politics works, but there needs to be some sort of conversation, an ongoing conversation, and people need to be receptive to the conversation because there is always a solution out there that will accommodate both sides of a conversation. So, um, Dragovox, I completely agree with that. Yes. Um, oh, Steve, thank you for mentioning that. Hi, Steve. Um, so Steve mentions that the FBI admitted that they messed up because originally this person was on YouTube and made a YouTube comment on some larger YouTuber's video about like I don't know, a very, very violent comment about gun use. And I mean, the FBI were notified about it, but apparently this happened anyway. So, and I think this proves to people that regardless if you have a police presence, regardless if there are guns present, regardless if even the FBI is aware of something, this type of thing can happen, and that is really concerning to me. So that begs the question, well, what is the solution? And I think the first thing that we need to acknowledge as the solution would be having a more open conversation about about mental health. Now, I wanted to read you guys a post because my roommate and I earlier today we were looking through Facebook and we saw this very, very troubling post who is I mean, this person is in support of gun possession, which that's fine. That's totally okay. However, their mentality reflects largely the mentality of the people who try to deflect or evade the fact that there is a problem. So let me read this to you. This is a post that was made by a Facebook user named Amy Keller, and it was posted on Valentine's Day, which, if I remember correctly, was the day that this happened. She says, and I quote, "Don't tell me it's a gun control issue. Don't attempt to even hint that it's the NRA or Trump that is causing this. This this is a mental health issue that is not being addressed in America. We all had bullies in school. We had weird kids, but they didn't gun down other students. This is directly related to a combination of mental health, poor parenting, and the pussification of this nation. When our children don't know what bathroom to use, are offended by everything, and see that they are exonerated from their actions because they can blame it on others, that in itself is the problem. Murder is illegal, drugs are illegal, yet they still happen. Calling for stronger gun laws isn't the answer. It isn't the gun. Start holding the perpetrator responsible and the system that failed them." Well, funny thing, Amy, but the system is actually part of the problem in the sense that it completely looks the other way. And your comment is a classic example of looking the other way. And what really upset that post was her comment of the nation of this nation. And when I occasion, I'm assuming I know what she means. She's saying that it's so offended and bothered by everything, and that's why America is just a bunch of pussies. I really hate that word in that context. It's very, very demeaning. Very demeaning. But see, it comes back to that machismo, that masculinity, because masculinity is what teaches us that anything that expresses emotions or points out problems or gets offended or anything, that's the opposite of masculine, that's feminine. And that is why people use words like pussification. And the irony is that she is a woman who is basically submitting to a very toxic masculine stereotype. And that is, I think, part of the destructiveness that is going on when it comes to our inability to face things that are happening right now. America is not a bunch of pussies. America is more aware of what offends people. America is more aware of how to actually care about the well-being of other people. Now, it would be really nice if people in power and people on that side of the discussion would look at things from a different light as well and understand that that care has a purpose. And the truth is, we care more about offending people now because we are aware that not being aware of people's emotions causes conflict, causes destruction, causes further divides between groups of people. So if you think that that is being a pussy, I find that to be a very asinine, not to mention ignorant mentality. I'm just gonna be completely honest. And I mean, I don't know, maybe it comes down to education. Maybe it comes down to people not learning to care. Like at least people in that type of mindset not learning to care. And when well, Amy, and when she said that that put the blame on the perpetrator, obviously the blame is put on the perpetrator. But with how frequently this happens, there has got to be a larger problem. So America right now is failing at the conversation of mental health, which, I mean, clearly this person had some sort of mental health problem and it wasn't addressed. And I wonder why it wasn't addressed because men are taught to not be articulate and open about mental health. Men are taught to man up, internalize, get through it, be a man. And what do you think happens when a person internalizes that much? Hmm? It builds and it builds until they become even more mentally unstable and something happens. So the solution is, I mean, it has to be a multi-layered solution. People have to acknowledge that the problem is beyond the simple conversation of anti-gun or pro-gun legislation. It's about mental health. And it's about our country's mental health when it comes to our fixation with power and toxic masculinity. I know this isn't a super happy subject to talk about, guys, and I appreciate you listening. I appreciate you listening because it's obviously it's had me depressed. I know it's had a lot of people depressed, but you know what? When you're depressed, America would probably tell us, well, don't talk about it. Don't boggle people down. Man up and be strong. But you know what? Damn it. I insist on talking about it because how do we come to an understanding and resolve these issues if not by talking about it? Drago mentioned that his stepdad and mother died a few months or a year or beforehand, which I think attributed to his depression, if he had it. So maybe that loss did contribute to something. He was displaced. The perpetrator was displaced. Not that I'm saying that that justifies behavior, but I mean, clearly there was no acknowledgement that I'm aware of his mental health condition. They may not even have reached out about it because, again, we're taught not to. We're taught to be ashamed of showing that because it demonstrates weakness. Hi, Tiffany. I hope you're okay tonight. I love you. I'm glad you're here. But it really intrigues me because people still think that mental health isn't a topic that needs to be discussed. And my question is simply is like, why? Like, people can suffer mentally as much as they can physically. And that's why I try to be so like adamant about talking about this type of thing because we need to create solutions, but we can't create solutions until we actually acknowledge the problem in the first place. So, yeah. Oh, honey, I'll message you right after I'm done with my live stream, okay? Um, Tiffany says that I hope you're okay with me mentioning this. A few years ago, I was told not to talk about my self-harming because it made people uncomfortable. And, you know, and I can understand that sense of sadness by being told that because I've been told that about talking about suicide awareness and things like that. People don't want to hear things, and the reason why they don't want to hear things is because it's usually too difficult to hear. And, well, sometimes in order to learn, people need to hear difficult things. People need to be exposed to that stance that challenges them, to that difficult experience that someone else has had in order to understand where they're coming from or understand maybe a part of themselves. But so I wanted to read you guys a poem. Probably were not expecting me to read a poem during this live stream, um, but I will. I wrote a poem not long after the Las Vegas shooting. I think it was back in October. Um, the poem is called 30 Odd 6, which is a type of gun. Here it goes. Everything's tired and burdened by the sun's 7 p.m. rays. Its spears of light sink as it, too, realizes it's exhausted. The white pine casts its long shadow across the grass. A late day titan looms over the half-mowed lawn, still uneven. Wind-frayed apple leaves droop, caked with dust from lack of rain. Bumblebees dance across half-dead goldenrods, frantic to find their way back home. Leaves crunch beneath heavy apple canopies. Tiny shoes uncoordinatedly dodge deer hoof divots as he works his way to his favorite tree, the one with the face that reminds him of home. 5-year-old fingers trace 50-year-old bark, appreciate the weathered roughness of the relic. He sees sunlight glint in the rotten apple graveyard before him, reaches forward and grasps onto a metallic cylinder with the imprint reading 30-6. He keeps the treasure, drops the copper in his pocket, and feels the weight of it against his thigh. "I'll put it in my treasure chest," he says, under his breath, dashing back home. One child's treasure is another man's leisure, perhaps even a desperate measure. So yeah. Hey Kana, you have a great rest of your night, okay? Thank you for tuning in. I appreciate it. And William, it's good to see you. So yeah, that poem, um, the 30-6 piece of copper that the person found in the poem was obviously a bullet. And I really tried putting into that poem how exhausted the world is of seeing things like that. And that kid picking up that bullet had no idea that it was what it was meant for. All it did was it looked pretty. And I think that's kind of America's mentality right now. We think guns are awesome, cool, protective, badass, masculine. And, well, but that's, oh, I mean, what were they meant for, you know? Hunting, protection, certainly not. It's been happening lately. Thank you guys. I'm glad you liked it. Thank you. I just want it to be better. And what makes me sad about these events is that they just put people against each other. And we all have our stances. We all have rights that we don't want trudged upon. We all want what we want. But at the end of the day, lives are more important than objects. And I firmly believe that people need to begin acknowledging that there needs to be more than the dichotomy of solutions that we have right now. There needs to be a third solution. And I believe part of that solution is talking more about mental health, not only on an individual level, but also a national level. Yeah. Anyway, so a little bit of random conversation before I leave here. I'm not going to be live streaming as long as I did the other night because I do have a lot of stuff to do tonight. I have to, propping my legs up. I have to get my poems together for a reading that I'm doing tomorrow. I'm honestly thinking about that poem and doing that poem, but where I live, it kind of worries me because I live in a rather conservative area, you know. But I need to get that ready. I have grading to do, stuff like that. But I wanted to come on and talk to you guys for a while because I really think that we all need to have a conversation of sorts. And I always think that good conversation sometimes helps us either create solutions or, in general, just helps us feel better, feel better. So, so yeah. Do you guys have any questions for me before I go or anything? William, I still live in Michigan. I still live in Michigan. I love Michigan. Michigan is where my family is, and I enjoy the beauty here, even though wintertime really sucks, but I really enjoy this place. Oh, I need to give a shout out to Educating Shani. She gave me a shout out in one of her videos yesterday, which totally made my day. So she is still saying that she's going to make a video about the whole YouTube situation with my partnership. So I'm really looking forward to that. But yeah, speaking of partnership stuff, I only have 4 more days, almost 3 more days until I lose it. So I'm just bracing myself. I tweet at least once a day toward YouTube and be like, hey, YouTube, are you listening? Of course, no response. Although thankfully, I do seem to get more and more people retweeting and sharing stuff. So I do appreciate that very much. Excuse me. I'm having squirts, so it's kind of giving me hiccups right now. Tiffany YouTube partnership program. uh, no matter what happens with that partnership situation, like I've said before, I'm going to keep doing this. I'm going to keep trying to talk about mental health. We need to. Drago says, since it's now random talk and we were talking about writing, I'm actually trying to write a kaiju book that I want to publish. Ooh, that sounds really awesome. You should email me or something and we can talk more about it. I'd very much like to hear about it. I really need to get into writing fan fiction again. I really miss writing fan fiction. You have no idea. Like, it was my life for a long time, and it helped me get through a lot of stuff during a time where I didn't think I could talk about mental health. So, well, my dears, oh, Tiffany, congratulations, chapter 101 in your romance novel. I still need to read it. When I don't have a bunch of novels to read, well, actually, send it to me again. I would like to read it. And between books for my literature class, I'm going to try to read bits and pieces of it. So, by the way, check out my friend Tiffany Gray. Check out her channel, Tiffany Gray Music, and also Tiffany Gray Diary. She's amazing and wonderful. I love her to death. Check out my other friend, Cindy, Stream of Awareness. Great videos as well. Um, I just, I love them. I love you guys. You guys support me, so I think it's important to support you too. Tiffany Gray's Diary. Sorry. Thank you for correcting me. Um, but we support each other, and I think that's what we need to do. And if that, that's interesting saying that because I really feel like that's part of the solution to the problem I was talking about in America as a whole. The solution to the problem is one, acknowledging that mental health on a national level needs to be addressed. Two, boosting some certain regulations. And three, being there for each other. Being there for each other doesn't necessarily mean that we have to be there with a gun. It means that we need to be aware of each other and be aware of each other's mentalities, our health, physically and mental. So, anyway, thank you guys for being here with me and listening. Thank you for listening to me try to articulate myself. Um, if you haven't yet, please subscribe to my channel. If you already are subscribed, thank you for coming back always. I appreciate it. It means a lot to me. Um, so keep tweeting YouTube, keep tweeting my stuff, sharing my stuff, comment on it, give me a like. Every little thing helps. So remember, we need to be there for each other and we need to be aware of each other's mental health. So thank you guys for taking the time to watch, and I hope you have a good night. And I'll try to post on my Donny Speaks channel videos from my poetry reading. So you guys have a good night. I love you.